A 1906 family photo was restored, and experts froze when they zoomed in on the youngest child's face. The photograph arrived at Maya Richardson's studio on a cold January morning, carefully wrapped in acid-free tissue paper and placed inside a padded envelope. Maya ran a specialized photo restoration business in Brooklyn and had seen thousands of damaged images pass through her hands: Civil War tintypes, faded Victorian portraits, water-stained family albums. But something about this package made her handle it with extra care. The return address showed it came from Charleston, South Carolina, sent by a woman named Grace Thompson. The letter that came with it was short: "This photograph has been in my family for generations. It's the only image we have of my great-great-grandmother's family, but it is badly damaged. I'm told you are the best at what you do. Please help me see their faces clearly." Maya carefully unwrapped the photograph and held it under her magnifying lamp. The image was indeed in poor condition. The emulsion had cracked and peeled in several areas. Water damage had left dark stains across the bottom third, and a crude repair from years ago had only worsened things. Yet beneath the damage, she could make out the faint forms of 7 people standing in front of a wooden house with a wide front porch. The photograph was mounted on thick cardboard, and on the back, written in faded pencil, was the date, June 1906, Charleston. Below that, someone had listed names, though several were unreadable because of water damage. Maya photographed the damaged original with her high-resolution camera, creating a digital master file to work on without risking further harm to the fragile physical piece. She then opened her restoration software and began the painstaking digital repair. She first addressed the structural damage, carefully cloning undamaged sections to fill cracks and gaps, smoothing water stains, and removing discoloration from the earlier failed repair. This technical work required precision and patience. Maya had been doing this for 15 years, ever since graduating with a degree in art conservation, and her hands moved with practiced confidence across her tablet. After 3 hours, the basic structure was restored. The composition became clear: a family of 7 on their porch. The adults wore Sunday clothes, the man in a dark suit with a high collar, the woman in a white blouse and long skirt. 5 children ranged from a teenager to a small child of about 4, sitting on the porch steps. Maya saved her work, stretched, and prepared to begin the detailed restoration of the faces the next day. The following morning, she returned with fresh eyes and a strong coffee. Now came the delicate task of restoring features that made these people individuals. She started with the adults, enhancing contrast and sharpness to reveal facial lines, clothing texture, and expressions. The man looked to be in his mid-30s, with a strong jaw and serious expression, resting a hand on the woman's shoulder in a gesture of protection. The woman's face showed intelligence and determination, her gaze steady and posture upright, despite the demands of managing a household and 5 children in 1906 Charleston. Maya then moved to the children, from oldest to youngest, a teenage boy around 15, 2 girls about 12 and 10 with braided hair and white ribbons, a 7-year-old boy grinning despite the formal occasion, and finally the youngest, a little girl sitting on the porch steps, hands folded in her lap. The damage to this part of the photograph had been severe, with a large water stain obscuring most of her face. Maya carefully removed the discoloration and enhanced details. As the child's features emerged, Maya paused. Something about the face seemed unusual. She zoomed in on the eyes and forehead, her breath catching. Even with the remaining imperfections and the limits of 1906 photography, what she saw didn't make sense. The child's face showed characteristics that wouldn't be understood or diagnosed for another 50 years. Maya had restored thousands of photographs and seen countless facial variations, but this was different. Something the 1906 family couldn't have described, something remarkable and potentially dangerous in the segregated South. She called Dr. James Wright, a colleague and medical history professor at Columbia University, known for helping identify medical conditions in historical photos. "James, I need you to see this," she said. "I'm working on a 1906 photograph, and I think I'm seeing signs of a genetic condition in a child's face. One that wasn't even identified until the 1950s. James arrived that afternoon, curious. He studied the image on Maya's monitor, zoomed in on the child. His expression shifted from interest to focused attention. then astonishment. "You're seeing what I'm seeing?" Maya asked. He nodded. "If this photograph is authentic and unaltered, and I assume you've verified that, then yes. This shows clear markers of Waardenburg syndrome. Look at the spacing of the eyes, dystopia canthorum. That lighter patch in her hair is a white forelock, and the eyes, complete heterochromia, different colored eyes. Combined, it's almost certainly Waardenburg syndrome type 1. Maya shivered. The syndrome wasn't identified until 1951, yet the photo was from 1906. James explained that Petrus Johannes Waardenburg was the first to recognize the condition, but it had always existed. Before then, people with these features were considered unusual, marked by God, or cursed. For a black child in Charleston's rigid segregation, looking so different would have been startling, possibly dangerous. Maya imagined what life had been like for this girl. Her pale blue eye contrasting with the deep brown of the other, the white forelock, and the distinctive facial features. She'd been unmistakably different. Maya checked Grace Thompson's letter again. Grace had sent the photo to learn about her ancestors. "Should I tell her what we found?" she asked James. "Absolutely," he said. "It's part of her family's story, and historically significant." Maya spent the afternoon finishing the restoration with new care, enhancing the child's features without exaggeration. When she finished, the little girl's face was clear, wide-set eyes with striking color difference, a white streak in her dark hair, and a small, serious expression, suggesting she already knew she was different. Maya printed 2 copies, one for Grace Thompson, one for her files, and carefully wrote an email. "Dear Miss Thompson, I have completed the restoration of your family photograph. The image was badly damaged, but I was able to recover most details. However, during the restoration, I noticed something important about the youngest child in the photograph. The little girl showed clear physical signs of a genetic condition called Waardenburg syndrome, which affects pigmentation and facial structure. This condition wasn't medically recognized until 1951, so your ancestors in 1906 wouldn't have known what made this child different. I'm sharing this with you because it may help you understand your family's history better. If you want, I can discuss this further with you and help research what we can find about this child and what her life may have been like." Maya hesitated before clicking send. She was about to tell a stranger that their ancestor had a genetic condition, information that could be surprising or upsetting, but Grace had asked her to help see the faces clearly, and this was part of that truth. She sent the email and carefully packaged the restored photograph for shipping. 3 days later, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a Charleston area code. "Miss Richardson, this is Grace Thompson. I received your email about my great-great-grandmother's family photograph," Grace said, her voice warm but emotional. "I've been staring at the restored image for 2 days. The little girl with different colored eyes, that's my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Sarah." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "The child in the photograph grew up. Do you know anything about her life?" "That's why I'm calling," Grace continued. "After reading your email, I went through all the family papers I have, old letters, Bible records, newspaper clippings my grandmother saved. I've been trying to piece together Sarah's story for years, but there are so many gaps. My grandmother never talked much about her own grandmother, and when she did, she was vague. I always wondered why. Now I think I'm starting to understand." "What did you find?" Maya asked. Grace took a deep breath. "I found a letter from 1924 written by Sarah to her daughter, my great-great-grandmother. In it, she talks about being different all her life, about how people treated her with fear or fascination. She mentions a woman named Clara who protected her as a child and taught her everything. I never understood that before, but now I do. Now I know Sarah had Waardenburg syndrome." Maya nodded. "And in 1906, Charlesto. That would have made her very vulnerable. Ms. Richardson, would you help me find out more about Sarah? About Clara who protected her? About Sarah's life?" Grace asked. "I have pieces, but I can't put them together on my own." 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the arrivals area of Charleston International Airport, holding a sign with Grace Thompson's name. She had decided this story was too important to research from a distance. Grace came from the crowd, a woman in her early 52s with warm eyes and her great-great-grandmother's high cheekbones. They recognized each other immediately, and Grace pulled Maya into a hug. "Thank you for coming," Grace said. "I know you didn't have to do this. Restoring the photograph was your job. This is something more. "This is history," Maya replied, "and I want to help you find it." They drove into Charleston as the afternoon light turned golden, past historic homes and live oaks draped with Spanish moss. Grace pointed out landmarks, the old Slave Mart Museum, Mother Emanuel AME Church, neighborhoods that were central to Black Charleston in the early 20th century. The house in the photograph no longer existed. It was torn down in the 1950s during urban renewal, but I know the street it was on, and I've been researching what the neighborhood was like in Sarah's time. Grace's home was a modest bungalow in North Charleston, filled with family photographs spanning 5 generations. She had converted her dining room into a research space, a large table covered with organized stacks of documents, a computer, and a whiteboard filled with notes and a hand-drawn family tree. "I've been working on this for 3 years," Grace said, gesturing at the organized chaos. "Ever since my mother died and I inherited all the family papers she kept. I knew our family had interesting stories, but I didn't realize how much history was hidden here." She carefully lifted a stack of letters wrapped in ribbon. "These are from Sarah. She wrote them to my great-great-grandmother, her daughter, between 1924 and 1948. Sarah died in 1952, when my grandmother was a teenager. By then, she rarely spoke about the past. My grandmother said Sarah became quiet in her later years, as if she was tired of remembering." Maya handled the letters gently, aware she held pieces of Sarah's voice from decades ago. Grace then pulled out another document, a small leather-bound book with a broken clasp. "This is what made me contact you," she said. "It belonged to Clara Bennett, covers 1902 to 1928, and Sarah is mentioned throughout. It's more than a diary, full of medical observations, treatment descriptions, and records of births and deaths in the community. Clara must have been a midwife or healer." Maya opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, each entry dated and detailed. She randomly flipped to August 1906. "Sarah continues to thrive despite talk among some families. Her eyes and hair make her a curiosity, but she is bright and quick to learn. I convinced her mother to keep her close until she is older and stronger. The world is not always kind to those who are different." Maya and Grace spent the evening reading Clara Bennett's journal aloud and taking notes. It painted the story of a remarkable woman who had served Charleston's Black community as a healer, midwife, and informal physician for nearly 30 years. Clara, born in 1870 to formerly enslaved parents, had learned herbal medicine and midwifery from them. By 1902, she had established herself as a trusted community figure, assisting with births, illnesses, and deaths. The first mention of Sarah appeared in June 1906, the same month as the family photograph. Ruth delivered her 5th child today, a girl named Sarah. The birth went well, but the child's appearance is unusual. Her eyes are 2 different colors, one dark, one pale blue, with a white streak in her hair. Ruth is afraid the baby is cursed. I assure her the child is healthy, just different. I've read of such cases in medical texts, though I have no name for this condition. Your great-great-grandmother was born in 1906, Maya said, looking up. Grace nodded, tears in her eyes. Clara was there from the start, aware of what Sarah faced even as an infant. Following entries showed Sarah's growth, sitting up, crawling, responding to sounds and voices, while Clara recorded the community's reactions. People are talking about Ruth's unusual child. Some say she is marked by God, others whisper darker things. I've tried educating families, but superstition runs deep. Ruth keeps Sarah mostly at home, which is wise for now, but that cannot last forever. By 1908, Sarah was 2 years old, and the journal entries showed Clara taking a more active role in her life. I have offered to help teach Sarah when she is older, Clara wrote. Ruth is grateful but worried about how people will react if her daughter learns too much. I reminded her that knowledge is the best protection we can give our children, especially those who will face extra attention for being different. Maya noticed a pattern in Clara's writing. She wrote about other children in the community, their illnesses, growth, and families, but she returned to Sarah repeatedly, with more detail and personal care than a normal medical record. Clara became Sarah's protector. Maya could see that Clara recognized something special in Sarah and decided to shield her from the worst she would face. Grace pulled out a faded newspaper clipping from the Charleston Messenger, a Black-owned newspaper of the early 20th century. The article was dated 1925, and featured a young woman in a nurse's uniform. The headline read, L. Optical woman completes nursing training. Maya looked at the photograph and then at the restored 1906 family portrait. The same distinctive features, the wide-set eyes, even though the heterochromia is less visible in this lower-quality image. That's Sarah. That's Sarah, Grace confirmed. She became a nurse. In 1925, South Carolina, a black woman with a visible genetic condition became a certified nurse. Maya could barely grasp how remarkable that was. The next morning, Grace took Maya to the Charleston County Public Library, which housed extensive historical records of the African-American community. They requested files on Clara Bennett, nursing schools in South Carolina during the 1920s, and the neighborhood where Sarah's family lived. The librarian, Frederick, an older man who had worked in the archives for 40 years, recognized Grace and greeted her warmly. When Grace explained their research, Frederick's expression grew thoughtful. Clara Bennett? I know that name. My grandmother spoke of a healer named Clara who delivered half the babies in the neighborhood. She was the smartest person she knew, taught herself medicine when no school would admit her. He disappeared into the back and returned with boxes of materials. These are records from the Cannon Street Hospital and Training School for Nurses. It was one of the few schools for black nurses in the 1920s. If your ancestor trained as a nurse, her records could be here. Maya and Grace spent hours examining admission records, training rosters, and graduation lists. Finally, Grace found it. Sarah was admitted in September 1922, sponsored by Clara Bennett, and graduated in May 1925 with honors, receiving a special commendation for dedication to patient care. Maya read aloud, sponsored by Clara Bennett. Clara not only protected and educated Sarah as a child, she made it possible for her to become a nurse. They found more details in Clara's journal entries from 1922. Sarah had been accepted to nursing school. Clara wrote, I used every contact and favor I've accumulated over 30 years to make this happen. The administrators were hesitant. Sarah's appearance is memorable in ways not always comfortable, but her intelligence and determination won them over. She will face challenges other students won't. People will stare at her eyes, whisper about her difference. But Sarah has lived being stared at all her life. She knows how to meet the world with dignity. Frederick brought employment records from the Charleston County Health Department. The department started hiring black nurses in the mid-1920s. If your ancestor worked after graduation, there might be records. They found Sarah's employment from 1926. Registered nurse, assigned to home visits in the East Side community. Monthly salary $45. Frederick pulled out a 1920s map of Charleston, pointing to the predominantly black and poor East Side. Poor sanitation, overcrowded housing, limited healthcare access. Nurses there faced anything from tuberculosis to malnutrition to untreated injuries. It required courage. Grace found a letter from Sarah written in 1927 to her baby daughter. I visit families who look at me with suspicion at first. My eyes make them unsure. But when I deliver a healthy baby or treat a fever, they forget my difference. They see someone who cares. Clara taught me the best way to overcome prejudice is to be undeniably good at what you do. On the third day, Grace took Maya to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. It was a small African-American cemetery with graves from the late 1800s. Sarah's headstone was simple, but engraved. Sarah, 1906 to 1952. Beloved mother, grandmother, and healer. They stood in silence. Maya thought about her life, born visibly different in a world that punished difference. Protect. Ted and educated by Clara, trained as a nurse against odds, and devoted her career to helping the most vulnerable. Grace quietly added, one more thing. She pulled a small wooden box from her bag. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a tarnished silver nursing pin, Sarah's graduation pin. My grandmother gave it to me before she died. Sarah wore it every day, even after it went out of style. It reminded her what she overcame. Maya photographed the pin carefully, adding it to her documentation of Sarah's life. As they worked, an elderly woman approached with a cane, looking at the headstone, and then Grace. "You're Sarah's family?" she asked. Grace nodded. Her great-granddaughter. Did you know her child, Sarah, delivered me? The woman smiled gently. December 1949, I was born 2 months early. The doctors said I wouldn't make it. Sarah came every day for 6 weeks teaching my mother how to care for me. She saved my life. The woman, Dorothy, was 74 and had lived her whole life in Charleston, remembering Sarah's visits in the late 1940s and early 1950s. People called her the nurse with angel eyes, Dorothy said, because one of her eyes was light like heaven. She was patient and kind, never rushed, explaining everything to families. Dorothy paused at the headstone. I remember she was sad sometimes. My mama said Sarah lived through things that would have broken most people, being different in a world that didn't understand, losing her husband young, working herself to exhaustion, yet she never stopped caring. Maya asked if Dorothy would be interviewed on camera. She agreed readily. Sarah's story deserved to be told. That evening, Maya set up cameras in Grace's living room. Dorothy spoke about Sarah's gentle manner, competence, and the way she commanded respect, even from those who might have dismissed a black woman nurse. She described Sarah's medicine bag, always organized, and how Sarah explained medical procedures so families understood. Over the next 2 days, Maya interviewed other elderly community members who remembered Sarah or had heard stories. A pattern emerged. Sarah was unusual in appearance but remarkable in character, turning her difference into strength. Robert, 91, remembered his mother saying Sarah persisted through nursing training despite administrators' doubts about her appearance. Once people met her, they forgot about her eyes. They saw her skill and kindness. Patricia showed photographs from a 1948 community health fair teaching mothers about nutrition and childhood illnesses. Sarah stood at a table, confident, her direct gaze showing comfort in her role despite a lifetime of being different. Records confirmed she worked as a nurse until 6 months before her death in 1952. She was 46 years old when she passed away, relatively young, and the death certificate listed heart failure as the cause. Clara's journal, which continued until 1928, mentioned Sarah's health several times, noting that she often pushed herself too hard and neglected her own well-being while caring for others. The last piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Grace's cousin in Colombia heard about the research and contacted them with a box of materials that had belonged to his mother, Sarah's daughter. Inside was a collection of letters Sarah had written to her daughter during the 1940s when her daughter was away at college. The letters were personal and revealing. Sarah wrote about her work, the family she cared for, and the challenges of being a black nurse in a segregated healthcare system. She also reflected on her childhood, growing up different, and the fears she had faced. In a 1946 letter, Sarah wrote, "I want you to understand what it means to be different, to have people stare at you and whisper. When I was young, Clara taught me that being different could be a burden or a gift, depending on how you carry it. I chose to let it make me more compassionate, more determined to help others who feel like outsiders. My eyes, which made people uncomfortable as a child, became my signature as a nurse. People remembered me, trusted me, knew I would come when they needed help. What could have limited me became part of my strength." Maya recorded the letter on camera, with Grace reading it aloud. It captured the essence of Sarah's journey. From a child who must have felt isolated and frightened, protected by a remarkable healer who saw her potential, to a woman who built a career helping others despite obstacles most could not imagine. On Maya's last evening in Charleston, she and Grace compiled all their discoveries into a timeline of Sarah's life, supported by documents, photos, and oral histories. The story that emerged was extraordinary. A child born with Waardenburg syndrome in 1906 South Carolina, raised in segregation, protected and educated by a community healer, trained as a nurse despite her visible difference, and dedicating her life to caring for the most vulnerable. 3 months after returning to Brooklyn, Maya attended the Charleston Museum for the opening of an exhibition titled Hidden Faces, Revealed Lives, the story of Sarah and Clara Bennett. The restored 1906 family photograph held a central position, enhanced to show Sarah's distinctive features clearly. Beside it, Clara's journal was open to the entry describing Sarah's birth, Other walls displayed the letter where Sarah reflected on turning her difference into strength, photographs of her as a young nurse, training records, testimonies from people she had helped, and a timeline showing how an unidentified genetic condition shaped a remarkable life. Grace stood beside Maya, surrounded by family, cousins, nieces, nephews, and great-grandchildren of Sarah's siblings. The exhibition brought together branches of the family who hadn't been in contact for decades, all connected by an ancestor whose story had been hidden for generations. Dr. James Wright contributed a medical panel explaining Waardenburg syndrome, its genetics, traits, and why it wasn't identified until 1951. He emphasized that people with this condition were often misunderstood or feared, but it didn't affect intelligence or capability. The exhibition also honored Clara Bennett, whose journal preserved so much of the story. Research revealed Clara had delivered over 800 babies, trained dozens of women in midwifery and herbal medicine, and quietly challenged the medical establishment, showing that black women could practice healthcare with skill, even when denied formal training. A local filmmaker attending the opening wanted to create a documentary. A medical historian from Duke University wanted to include Sarah's story in a book about genetic conditions in African-American communities, and a Charleston nursing school expressed interest in a scholarship in Sarah's name for students from underrepresented backgrounds. As the evening continued, Dorothy, the woman Sarah had helped deliver in 1949, stood before the central photograph with tears in her eyes. "I have lived 74 years because of her," she said. "When I was born too early and too small, she refused to let me die. She came every day, sometimes twice, teaching my mother how to keep me alive. She did it not for money, but because every life mattered. Every child deserved a chance." Grace addressed the crowd. "When I sent the damaged photograph to Maya for restoration, I only wanted to see my ancestors' faces clearly. I never imagined what we would uncover or how many lives Sarah touched. We knew she had been a nurse, but not the full story. We didn't know about Clara, who protected and educated her, or about the genetic condition that made her different, or how she turned that difference into strength. We didn't know how many lives she saved." Grace paused, looking at the photograph of 4-year-old Sarah with her striking eyes. Sarah grew up when being different was dangerous, when being a black woman meant constant barriers, when pursuing education and nursing required unimaginable courage. Yet she did it, supported by people like Clara, who saw her worth. This exhibition honors not just Sarah, but all remarkable people whose stories deserve to be remembered. Maya watched visitors move through the exhibition, reading documents, studying photos, and learning about a woman born different in 1906, who turned that difference into a lifetime of service. The restoration of a single damaged photograph had revealed an entire hidden history of resilience, courage, and determination. Several elderly attendees shared stories of their own family members who had faced similar challenges, opening conversations about difference, disability, and community responses. As the reception ended, Maya stood before the restored photograph. She remembered zooming in on Sarah's face, recognizing a genetic condition invisible to people in 1906. Yet people had seen it: Sarah's family, her community, Clara Bennett. They had chosen to protect and nurture her, giving her education and opportunity to help others. The photograph was no longer just a damaged image. It had become a window into hidden history, a testament to the power of one person's determination and community. Support. 4-year-old Sarah, sitting on the porch steps in 1906 with her different colored eyes and white streak, had grown into a woman who delivered babies, treated illnesses, saved lives, and earned respect. Her face, frozen in time, held a secret revealed more than a century later. Grace approached Maya as the museum closed. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing what was hidden and helping me find the truth. Sarah deserves to be remembered." Maya hugged her. "Thank you for trusting me with your family's story and sharing it with the world. There are likely thousands of people like Sarah, with stories hidden in damaged photographs and forgotten documents. Maybe this will inspire others to explore their family histories." As Maya flew back to Brooklyn the next day, she thought about the dozens of damaged photographs waiting for restoration at her studio. She wondered how many hidden stories were waiting to be discovered. Sarah's story had started with a damaged photo and ended with a museum exhibition, reconnecting a community with its history and honoring a woman's legacy. For Maya, it reinforced something she always believed. Every photograph holds a story, and every life deserves to be seen, understood, and remembered. The photograph of 4-year-old Sarah with her remarkable eyes would continue to hang in the Charleston Museum, visible to generations who could learn from her strength. Elderly people in Charleston would continue telling their grandchildren about the nurse with angel eyes, who refused to let being different stop her from being extraordinary.